OhioX UX and product community. So by way of a little introduction to start, my name is Chris Berry. I'm the president of OhioX. We are a statewide tech and innovation focused nonprofit working to build Ohio into a tech hub. We have member companies that partner with us to help us do that, from Fortune 500 businesses to startups and everything in between, hospital systems, university, research centers, private businesses, and more. It's a really exciting time for tech in our state. And as part of that growth, it's the community of professionals and different disciplines. And so this is around product and UX. So I'm going to turn it now over to Shawn, who is, we're thankful that he chairs these conversations. He puts these together. He's a product pro, and he's brought some great guest speakers for us today. So Shawn, I'm going to turn it over to you for an introduction of yourself, of our panelists of today's conversation. I'm going to exit the stage, but I'll be in the background for any help. But Shawn, thanks so much for all you do, and I'm looking forward to listening.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate the intro. Hi, everyone. Shawn Leitner, product management consultant and coach for Pathfinder Product Labs out of Columbus. I'm based in Cleveland. Pathfinder offers product management consulting and coaching recruitment for large enterprises, small companies, anybody looking to strengthen the product management muscle of their organization. We teach and guide companies as they kind of strengthen that product management muscle to get stronger at product management, at product development, and really ultimately create great user experiences and great products for customers. And you really can't build awesome products, even if you have the best product management team and skills within your organization, without having good user experience. Ultimately, that's what customers pay for. That's what customers use your products for. And having a good user experience, understanding what a good user experience is very key to that. Luckily, there are many skilled people that do user experience. We have our panelists today that do that, day in and day out, and have been doing it for years. And I'll intro them in a little bit. Keith Instone, Venessa Heilman, and Felesia McDonald. Hopefully she's able to join us here soon. They've been doing UX design for a while, thought leaders in both research and design, and discussing really today how we as product people can utilize and leverage UX design principles and practices to really create awesome products. So, I'll let each panelist intro themselves. So, Keith, if you could get us started.
Sure. Hi. Yeah, my name's Keith Instone. I'm a digital experience research analyst at a company called Stratascale. We're an IT consulting company. There I work in our innovation labs. So I get to do industry research. So understanding emerging technology and emerging trends, and then helping us and our clients understand what those trends are so that we can help them, deliver the IT solutions that meet those goals. In the past, I was a user experience consultant, and so I did research there too, but that was more around user research. And I got my start in academia at Bowling Green State University in the computer science department doing human computer interaction research. And so that's where I was in the mid 90s, Shawn, when you were getting your computer science degree. You walked by my office. I don't think you took any classes that I taught at the time,
Nope.
But right around then, we were actually the funnest thing. The most fun thing we were doing was working with colleagues in Russia to help build the bridge between Russian user experience research and the West. So I've got some stories about visiting Russia in the 90s that we can save for a different time.
Great. Thanks, Keith. Venessa?
All right. My name is Venessa Heilman, and I am the UX manager at OhioHealth. And I have the honor of, like I said, managing the UX team. It's a fairly new team. Product is fairly new at OhioHealth, about 3 years old. I got my start, oh my gosh, I don't even want to say how long ago, but I was in UX before they called it UX. They used to call it information architecture. And I've worked in a lot of different industries. I did a lot of agency work. I've worked in energy, private aviation, financial, and now healthcare. So I'm really excited to talk about all of this here today with all of you.
Excellent. Thank you. Felesia, have you been able to join us yet?
I'm here.
Hi,
Yes.
Felesia.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Can you intro yourself, please?
Sure. I'm Felesia McDonald, also known as Felesia. I am the user experience manager for Sherwin-Williams. I have a MS degree from Kent State. I'm also an adjunct instructor at Kent State in the UXD department. I have been in UX for, let's say, about 12 years now. My career started when I was working at the Plain Dealer as an interactive graphic artist. I went on to get a diploma in web design from the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, and that's where I learned about user experience design, not knowing that it was called user experience design at the time. I was introduced to UX by way of Jesse James Garrett's book, The Elements of the User Experience, and I fell in love with it because that's really what caught my eye, attracting me to understanding that this user experience design is about learning about the user, not just building a pretty design. There's really a lot that goes into it. So that became my passion. So here I am today.
Excellent. Very good. Okay, so I thought I'd start with maybe a definition, and there's lots of definitions of user experience out there. I chose one from Nielsen Norman Group. User experience encompasses all aspects of the end user's interaction with the company, its services, and its products. The statement shows that user experience is crucial to building viable and valuable products, which is obviously what we all want to do. No matter what role we're in, whether it's UX, whether it's product, whether it's engineering, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales, right? We want to build good stuff that our customers find value in, that align with our company's strategy. But I think the important part here is, not just how the user uses the product, but also how it interfaces and interacts with the company itself. Right? We have to consider. I think Felesia kind of hit on this in terms of, it's the entire journey. It's not just the product. So it's anything like your visit to the doctor or to the airport, to your shopping experience, whether it's online, whether it's in store, whether it's in the metaverse. It's paying a parking meter downtown, which, by the way, in Cleveland, you still have to use quarters, which is frustrating. Hashtag eye roll. But ultimately, I think it's the entire user experience from beginning to end. There's lots of frameworks around that and things like jobs be done, et cetera. But you understanding what the user is trying to do throughout their experience and why they're using your product, frankly. Mm-hmm. And if you're more of a visual person about what user experience is, this is one of my favorite UX Venn diagrams. Obviously, there's a lot to unpack here. Whether you need a nap like we product managers apparently need, and same with small children. Tips on how to talk to customers, right? Obviously, we try to build stuff that our customers use, but without talking to our customers, do we really know whether or not it's going to provide the value that we think it is? Or even, why Keith hates boy bands, for example. So,
I think I'm in the could use a nap area right now.
For sure. Cool. Anyways, all kidding aside, how do we go about creating user experience teams? How do we create strong user experience disciplines and practices within our organizations? And heck, how do we do that at the state level? And frankly, that's why we're here, right? That's why you joined us today. Ultimately, where does a team start? We can start at the team level, from an organic perspective. I think Venessa, for example, you said OhioHealth's been doing it formally for like 3 years, right? So you got to start somewhere at the team level. So I guess Felesia, for you, kind of where does the team start? Does it start with processes and things like that we see here on the screen? Kind of talk us through that a little bit.
Well, it begins with an idea. So you have your product team meeting with stakeholders. Once they figure out there's the opportunity here, then UX comes in validating with the research. We come in to ensure that you understand who the users are, you understand why they would need this product, what value are we bringing to them by delivering this product? Is it something that they would even use or want? A lot of times people have tons of ideas about different features that a product may include or all the bells and whistles, but at the end of the day, is that really something that a customer is going to want? If you have an older group of users who are used to doing things with pen and paper, are they really going to switch to a digital product? So that's that first stage of the research, where you're really identifying the needs of your customers, you're understanding exactly how you can deliver value to them with the product that you're proposing. And then from that phase, from a UX perspective, we then tend to look at the persona. We break down all the different users within that group. Who are they? What are their demographics? What are they currently using? How do they go about accomplishing their task? Is it something that, again, back to the main question, is this something that they want and would use? So by having personas and understanding that customer journey, it allows us to really align the stakeholder values and goals with the customer goals. Identifying, are we filling the gap for a customer? Are we really delivering them value with the products that we're proposing? So once you identify who your users are, how they're going to use the product, and also how you need to adapt for the various user groups. So for example, if you have an older group that's say 65 and you have a younger group who you're proposing to use the same type of product, you have to ensure that you're addressing the needs of both user groups. A younger user group may be more comfortable using a digital product, whereas an older group may not be. So it all depends on how you're able to identify your users, how you're able to gather that information and collaborate with the product team to ensure that the products and features they're proposing align with what the customer's expectations are. So once you get through that analysis phase, then you can build your prototype. The prototype is based on low fidelity wireframes where you're iterating through the process. You're trying to understand exactly, how should we build this application? How should it work? How should it look? What are the expectations of the customer? Is it an efficient user flow? Going from one interaction to the next, is it smooth? Does it make sense for our customers? So as you're analyzing all the labels, the CTAs, the language, is it a natural progression? So for example, on the home page, do you have a grid account or do you have a sign-in? What's more natural to the customer? Where are they at in that journey? And that's where the prototyping comes in, where you start iterating and you start going through the process of understanding, okay, what happens next? That's always what I'm asking. Okay, we're here, what happens next? And if you get to that next part and you really can't tell me where we're going or why we're here, then we kind of need to evaluate what we're doing at this stage. From prototype, you can then go into creating your high fidelity designs. And that's where, I'm not proficient. I don't claim to be a graphic artist, so my design skills are somewhat lacking. I can do the low fidelity wireframing, and then thank God they're graphic designers because things look alike to me. So I collaborate with them very, very well, and we work closely together. But even in that design phase, you still iterate, you're still conducting usability testing, you're looking at style guides to ensure your design aligns with the company's style, it's consistent. And then once you deliver that product, you're never done. You're constantly going back, you're iterating, you're conducting usability tests to make sure that the product aligns with the user goals, that it's successful, and you're identifying pain points. And between that prototyping and that delivery phase, it's constant iteration for the complete life cycle of the product.
Yeah, thanks, Felesia. A question for you, in fact, is very relevant. I saw something in the news today about getting each household can get 4 free COVID tests from the U.S. Postal Service. Yes. But then somebody tried to get one to deliver to an apartment, and the website said you've already registered at that address. So,
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, thinking about the persona, right? They built it in such a way that it's expected to be a single family household, as opposed to somebody who lives in an apartment building and the address matches, but the apartment number obviously doesn't. So,
right.
Thinking of the different personas and the journeys around that can fundamentally alter your solution here.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And not to mention, and what happens when there are more than 4 people in a household? Or what happens if you live in a duplex? The same thing, A, B, so.
Right, and that's often the case where the user interface designer on a project might say like, hey, we need an apartment field added here, right? We can't just ask the street address. And then somebody else will say, well, no, actually you can't add that field, or we shouldn't add the field because we have this business rule that's based on street address without apartment, right? So the best thing for the user is to add that field to the screen, but if you don't go back and change the business rules, you're just asking for an apartment address or apartment number that's going to get thrown away, right? And so it might seem easy. You just add a field to a form, but it's not that easy.
It also sounds like they didn't do any basic testing, because if they would have brought some users in, they would have done 4 or 5 people, found out somebody lived in an apartment, and it wouldn't have worked.
Right.
So it's an expensive lesson.
Yeah, for sure. Now, in each of these,
it's an easy fix, though. I mean, it's common.
Right.
Whenever you see an address form, you have that second field to identify exactly your address. So it just doesn't make sense. No UXers on the project.
Perhaps
sure.
not.
And I think,
no, go ahead.
And I think in that that's a good point, Felesia, because when you think about how much who's involved, right? Because some things when we, as a consultant, I see this often, like design gets brought in too late, research gets brought in too late. How do you build the construct or teams so that design and research has a seat at the table, so that there's enough runway to do some of these things, anticipate some of these challenges, because this is not a new thing at all, right? Somebody that lives in a single family home versus an apartment, that's kind of well known. So how do you go about that? I guess this is to all of our panels. How do you go about ensuring that the team has enough runway and that design and UX mindset is present in the decision making?
Yeah, so a lot of that would be come up in those early stages, right? If you're doing user research, even if there was already that somebody had already decided that about the apartment problem, right? You would have exposed that when you interviewed folks, right? You would have probably built a prototype and noticed it even when it was still in paper form, and you would have been able to raise that issue ahead of time so that other people could decide on the back end while you were still making progress here.
And I think even in best practices, I don't think if you would have had a UX in the beginning that it would have happened. Like that's just typically what best practices, what a form field with an address would have. So, I mean, it goes back to, at least in our organization, we've had the honor of being at the tip of the spear. So hopefully you wouldn't even see some of these problems.
Exactly. And that's why I don't think a UXer was involved, because
I agree.
We're going to understand, okay, address. You have to have X, Y, and Z to go along with that. It's just like you said, it's best practice.
Right.
Right. And then like during the analyze stage, right, we would have drawn some user journeys to help people understand that it's not just apartment versus single family home owners. There's going to be lots of other different ways that people are using it, right? There's probably going to be like like you said, somebody from 2 people from the same household trying to do it, right? And so there's going to be lots of those different scenarios that we tend to like expand out and let's map out all the possible scenarios. Okay, some of them are fringe cases that we don't, we can't deal with. Right. The person who's living in Antarctica and trying to fill out the form. Okay, fine, we can't deal with that, but it might happen. Okay, fine, but which are the 3 or 4 that are really common, really important, and really, in this case, life or death, right? So.
Right. And I think here, for when we look at, that's domain knowledge, right? And understanding not just domain knowledge about what you're trying to achieve as a product, but understand, typical user experiences, right? Whether it's online or whether it's in store or over the phone, those kinds of things, right? It's not necessarily everything's about websites, but as you look across, research, analyze, prototype, design, and deliver, what are the kind of skill sets? Because there's a lot of things listed here, a lot of artifacts that are being done, a lot of activities, and there's different skill sets that need to be utilized for each of these particular things. So can we talk through a little bit, what kind of skill sets we're talking about here?
Sure. Ooh. Somebody else want to start? I can go. I mean, there's a lot of left brain, right brain going on here. And typically you don't have someone in here that can, a part of a UX team that can do all of these exceptionally well. I mean, I'm lucky I have a team that has a lot of overlap, but at the extreme ends, again, you usually have someone who's much more focused and much more capable on those areas. But I think also it goes back to something that, Keith had talked about even before this presentation when we were all talking. There's some that all of UXers have in common, like curiosity and problem solving, but then it also gets into things that are much more, specialized: UX design, research, information architecture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it depends on how big the team is, how big your budget is. When I was at IBM, we had a full-time prototyper. That's all that he did. He just built prototypes for us to do things, right?
That
And
must
we
be
didn't have to,
nice.
right? We didn't have to steal developer time to do this one, or I didn't have to build my own prototypes, which I'm not very good at, right? So if it's important enough and you've got the resources and you've got the staff, you could have several people in each of these roles. What's more common, especially on a product team, is that you're a smaller team and you're leaner and you're winging it more. So it's good to have at least one jack of all trades who could fill in and do things just as it needs to be done. But usually there'll be a jack of all trades, but there'll be a specialist in one of them, right? So like I'll be really good at user research, but I could fill in doing UI design if I have to. I'm just not great at it, right? And then other people are awesome at visual design, but they love the chance to actually go out and help with user research, to go off. They may not lead the user research, but they're tagging along helping because they need the helping hand, but also that will make them better. When it comes time to design, they'll have a leg up.
In my perfect world, we have both, strong research side and someone who's really good on design. So I was able to kind of have that on my team. The Kent State program, we work more on the research side. So that's my focus and that's my strength and that's where my passion is. But to have someone with a graphic design skill who also has a strong research background, that's like the perfect marriage to me.
That makes sense. So, when we think about, building the best team, right, to have user experience as the forefront, as a focus on the team, we think about, what aspects does an organization need to consider, right? We've kind of talked about how a team can be successful, but, if you scale that up within an organization, how can an organization get good at user experience? So I guess, Venessa, what aspects should an organization consider, as they start a UX practice like your organization did 3 years ago, or scale it up from one team to 4 teams to the whole organization? Like, what aspects, like how would an organization go about, getting more focus on user experience design and research, ultimately to create better products?
I mean, all of these, but I think also one of the things that we were really lucky about at OhioHealth was executive level commitment. Because if you don't have that, I mean, that's really what's pushing it through the organization. I mean, everyone has dealt with this where it's like, we've done this like this for the past umpteen years. We don't think we need to change, right? Look at us, we're a successful business. So for an executive to come in and say, no, to be at the forefront, to be human-centered, this is what we have to do. I think that's the first thing where you need to start. And like I said, we were lucky there. But then also like changing mindsets. So it kind of goes to management of experiences, not just projects, products, and services. It's a cultural shift, right? And I'm sure like you've dealt with this too. I would love to hear from Keith and Felesia on this as well. We could talk about this whole slide for like 5 days, nonstop.
You can sign up for Venessa's class.
Yeah, Venessa Heilman. Yeah.
So definitely having that leadership and support from the executive level is instrumental in a good UX team or culture, because otherwise the UXer is not going to have the support that they need to be able to do what needs to be done. And more than likely they'll be bypassed, they won't be heard, and the experience will definitely suffer because, from a UX perspective, we rely on a lot of research. We rely on, and a lot of the work that I do is upfront prior to even understanding the ideation phase. So if I know something's coming up, or it pertains to a current project that we're working on, I'm already doing research to ensure that what we do aligns with what we currently have, it aligns with that experience. So if you don't have the support from your executive level to allow you to do the research that you need to do to ensure that application fits in holistically, then you're gonna you're not going to be able to deliver the best product from a UX perspective.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we were able to do, and our leadership allowed us to do, because it takes some time for them to see the value, where we bring value. But once they see it and they understand it, that was really the cultural shift. And now I actually have more of a problem of people want more UX than I can offer. I have a good sized team, but we can't do all of the projects within the organization. So we're now back to prioritization and making sure that we're providing the most value for the company.
I've seen this also on the product management side in terms of, and maybe that happens when new disciplines emerge in terms of, how companies are built, how they can be successful, or how you learn from other organizations as they mature. There's an education aspect to it, not just necessarily the executive level commitment. But there's also an education in terms of, well, what does it actually mean, right? When I brought in my first UX designer, at a former company, they thought I was a UI developer, right? So there was an education process in terms of, well, no, that's not what it is. So a UX design, this is their role, this is their responsibilities, and here's their expertise and skill set, and here's how it fits in the team and how it provides value to the rest of the team. And that was more on the organic team level, because that's where it started. Sometimes it comes from the executive level, sometimes it comes organically from the team level. But there's an education aspect to it as we in the technology space kind of get a little more focus on the skill sets and experience that we need.
Yeah, and some of it's trust, right? Because you're introducing a new role. It's like this person will be focused on the user interface design, but I'm a business analyst and I used to do that. And so now am I out of a job? And it's like, well, no, you now have more time for these other things, right? So it takes some time to sort of sort out the roles. And for a lot of organizations, unfortunately, they don't have clear, strong commitment from the top. And so do you just tell them to wait? So usually my advice is some of these other things, right? You can hire some help to just fill in the gaps, just to get the work done. But if you can, to me, what works best if you can start to measure it, right? Because then you can start to have some numbers. And, especially like at IBM, if we could make the business case, that would win out because it was all about the buck, right? And so if change needed to happen, if you could make the business case, then if nothing else, IBM was really good at supporting that business case, right? So, and other companies the same as well. So again, it's hard to measure it if you don't have the other things. So these are like 6 different pieces that you can make a little bit of progress at once. In a perfect world, you have all 6 and they interlock, but I've never met an organization that's perfect in all 6. So.
Right.
You know what? I don't think the education of UX ever stops. Because you have different people that come in, different people have a different perception of what user experience design is. Most people confuse UX with UI. So it's a constant education in terms of like going back to the research. Why is it valuable? Why is it important? Why do I need a user flow? That kind of thing. And just trying to establish the foundation needed for a good product and a good user experience. That's consistently where you have to kind of re-educate using lunch and learns, constantly having meetings with different PDMs just to get them to understand, okay, I'm not trying to take your product. I'm not competing with you. We both have a role, and I'm here to assist you and collaborate with you to ensure the best experience possible. Yeah. So that's part of it.
No, I think that's great. I think it's an important point. And also, it's not just educating for the sake of pushing the UX team forward. When you get that mind shift in your organization, everything becomes a little bit better because anything they're creating, even if they're not true UXers, they at least are starting to think about how, not just what's easiest to implement, because let's be honest, a lot of times we do that. Like we try to get it over the finish line so we can check the box. This a little bit changes the mindset in everyone, whether they're operational, whether they're tech, to start at least taking that perspective into mind. And I don't think that could ever hurt.
Right. Yeah, that's our lower left-hand one. And again, sometimes for me, it's like, well, I'll teach some UI design skills to your business analyst. That moves the ball forward. That is fine with me. I would love for you to hire a bunch of UI designers that have their degree from Kent State. But if that's not possible, then let's do some of these other things.
Right.
So what have you seen successful when we talk about organizational hierarchy? Many times we talk about silos and fiefdoms and territory and those types of things. What have you 3 found successful in terms of where user experience teams kind of reside, right? Are they in product? Are they in strategy? They're in marketing, under engineering? Like what have you seen be successful in terms of where UX typically resides within an organization?
I have lived in so many areas from UX. I have lived in tech. I have lived in strategy. I have lived in like a creative services domain. I think if I had my preferences, product would be its own thing. So it's an equal partner to the business and to technology. That's my personal opinion. I've never had that luxury, though. I would love to experience that if any of you have.
Nope.
So, yeah, that's one of those marriages that I think that can be made in heaven. So, right, if you've got an organization that's committed to product as its own thing and not sort of tangled up with the rest, then they've already sort of seen the value and they're willing to go through that change, right? So that's easier to tag along. Without that, I've seen everything work and not work at the same time. Back when we went to conferences every year, I remember going one year and catching up with two different people. The first person I caught up with said, how are things going? Oh, last year we got reorged. We used to be in IT. Now we're over in marketing. My job is great now. It's perfect, right? The next person I talked to was like, oh, we just got reorged. We got moved from marketing over to IT. My life is much better now, right? And it's all around because of the company culture and other things, right? So there's no one size fits all, but in general, right, if you can get an organization that's committed to product, that means they're already committed to quality, they're already committed to certain things. That makes it much easier to do the user experience work.
Well, Keith, I think that's a good point, because when you it can expose, particularly when you look at things like user experience, when you look at things like product and product-led organizations, it exposes some organizational chaos, I guess, potentially, in terms of how the organization is built, who are the decision makers, who has seat at the table, right, from an executive level for determining strategy and budgeting and direction, and what to focus on, where to invest. In my experience, things like product and UX sometimes tend to shift organizationally a different mindset, and sometimes it blows up in your face. And sometimes you're like, oh yeah, maybe we should start focusing on that a little bit more. And how do we do that? And it takes time, right? There's that organizational change. You got that momentum from years past, particularly if it's been very successful. But the world moves at a faster pace now. So in being mindful of how we create products and what our users' experience is can fundamentally alter how an organization is built and structured.
Agree.
You know what, Shawn? I worked in an organization where I was originally told that everything goes through product. So I really didn't have a voice. And when I would make recommendations, or if they came to me with something that was completely crazy, and I said, well, why are we putting this button way over here by itself if it's supposed to go with this content? Well, we just have space for it. Just put it over there. And I would kind of push back. And so after a while, I was labeled as being difficult because I didn't just do what the product person said, and this was a product-driven organization. So with that being said, it took time to really get the products team to understand that, no, I'm not fighting or disputing you. I'm just trying to help you understand and make a better experience. So it took years, and with that education and constant collaboration, that they were finally on board to understanding that UX and product can work together.
That's interesting. For that example, do you think they saw product as just being product management, like UX wasn't part of that product team necessarily?
UX was not, in my opinion, not a part of the organization, period.
Interesting.
I brought in some of the first research that we did, so UX was mainly done by a front-end developer. So whatever they told him to do, he would just do it. And so when I came on board, I was difficult because I kind of pushed back and I did things that had a different approach, and it wasn't pushing back in a negative way. It was just saying, hey, what about this? Or let's do this because makes more sense for the user, and doing usability. I introduced usability testing. So little things like that. Over time, I found that when you are able to show and validate your design decisions, that goes a much longer way than arguing or begging and pleading. Say, hey, look, let me show you. So I would go in the office and mock something up and come back and be able to say, well, 5 people didn't associate this button being over here with this content. And then they would be able to say, okay, and that's how I gained credibility and was able to develop a more collaborative relationship. So
Right, because going back to our Backstreet Boys, right, you could explain why, right? Why this one design was better than another design. It wasn't just your opinion, right? And so there's a lot of times when, like, trying to convey, this is not my opinion. This is what our users have given us input on,
Yeah,
right?
it's the qual and the quant to
right,
back it up.
right.
Yeah.
In a non-biased, semi-scientific way, not quite as scientific as when I was in academia, but still enough science around it and enough data behind it so that we don't have to spend 5 hours arguing about 5 different opinions. We can say, but just getting everybody to concede, this is what our users need. This is what we're going to go with. Sorry if you love buttons on the left, because like I don't care if the buttons are on the left or on the right. I want the buttons in the right place. But some people are still have that attachment to this was the menu that I sketched as the product owner or as the business owner or as the CEO of the company. They sketched up the menu system. Just implement it. Shut up and implement it. It's like, sorry, I can't do that.
Right.
Right. Yeah, we all want to avoid the hippos, right? The highest paid person's opinion.
Yeah.
Right. So, but we need to be able to be armed with the story and the narrative to combat that, right? Whether it's research, whether it's quantitative data, qualitative data, that's the best way to be able to do that. And you can make the case for it. And many times, when you think of whether it's sales or marketing or executives, right, they're just throwing ideas out there, right? They saw something, they heard something at a conference, they saw something on a blog, they heard something from a consultant, and maybe haven't formally digested all that. So they're like, oh, when confronted with the right story, they're like, oh, well, that makes sense. Let's take path B instead of path A.
Right.
Yeah, I don't have this on my LinkedIn profile, but for about a year, I was consulting with a client, and I was the unofficial bad idea killer, right? Because they were coming up with lots of ideas, and then I would go off and do the research and then help expose that, and then they would decide on their own that they were bad. I wasn't telling them that they were bad ideas, even though my gut said they were, but they gave me the freedom to go off and do some research, and then that helped them see, oh, it's more complicated than this, or it's not as simple as just copying Amazon, right? Because that was the most common idea, is like, let's copy Amazon for this. Okay, let me mock it up what it means for us. And it's like, that sucks. Yeah, all I had to do was draw it on paper, and they could see that it sucked. I didn't even have to test it with users. So,
did you try to work that into your job title, like bad idea killer? Because that would be.
It didn't. As a consultant, it didn't work. So.
Kind of goes with the territory in some respects. Yeah. So, as we think about how we create strong organizations built around user experience and strong product management disciplines, how can we support them at the state level? When you think about, how can we elevate, the complete state, all the organizations within the state for Ohio, and that's partly what OhioX's mission is, and that's why we're here today, and we believe in the organization. But I guess, Keith, thoughts on, I know you've talked about this a lot, what can we do as Ohioans for our organizations, and just in general for our communities of practice, whether it's UX or product or other related fields? How can we be a leader in innovative and valuable products, that customers ultimately love?
Yeah, right. Because part of OhioX wants to build up our tech capability. Not just because it's fun or cool, but that's what we're going to need to have a vibrant economy. We're going to need to be a strong state. That's what we're going to need to attract people or keep people living here, right? In the past, it was other things that kept people here, but now it's the tech jobs, it's the tech products that we make. So like for me, it's good product management, good user experience management, good designs are what will help our local companies be successful. And we have lots of examples of this. Like I think the first corporate user experience lab I ever went to was at Progressive Insurance in Cleveland back in the early 90s or whatever, right? So like they're ahead of the game. That's one reason that they've been successful in the marketplace. Nationwide just built a new innovation building right before the pandemic, and they've got a user experience team that hangs out there, right? So we have some local companies. Cincinnati is well known for its design ecosystem, right? And so one of the first human factors program was at Wright State. Back then they were doing human factors for airplane cockpits, right, to make sure that the planes didn't crash. Well, that's that it's the same basic stuff, but software is just a little bit different. So we have some examples across the state where we're already leaders at things, but I think we can build up some more of that knowledge, right? Helping our local companies be more successful at product management and user experience. Then their stock price goes up, they hire more people, and all those good, they create more jobs. So who doesn't want to create more jobs? So that to me is sort of how we add on to the OhioX mission of, to me, it's technology plus good product management, good user experience. That equals that innovation that we're going to need in order to be competitive.
Felesia, what have you seen at Kent State in terms of, because I know you've done some instructing there. Like, what have you seen from an academic perspective at Kent?
Well, the UXD department is ensuring that we're constantly learning. The demand from students is growing. And even in like the Facebook groups and things that I'm in, LinkedIn groups, all you hear about is UX. It's just like, I think UX in my sleep. I wake up and dream UX. It's just like I'm inundated. And there's such a huge demand because you have the opportunity for people to enter the field from all different backgrounds. You have, my major in school was communications and my minor was sociology. So it fits. I did a professional test, a career test, and it came up user experience designer. I was blown away. But UX is so in demand because it's a fun field, and I won't say anyone can do it well, but if you really work at it and you train yourself, you can do very well with UX.
I agree. Yeah.
One thing I think is about user experience, which I think is fascinating, and and I have the skills that the panelists here have today, but we all experience ourselves as a user, right? In any product we use. We talked about parking meters in downtown Cleveland, or we talked about visits to the airport or whatever, right? We're all user experiences. We all deal with user experiences and deal with products all day long. Whether it's stuff we can touch and hold or stuff we use, online or make a phone call or whatever. So I think that's, we can affect and impact users' experiences with the products we build. And that's what's fascinating, because particularly with like consumer related products that we can buy and test or use ourselves. B2B solutions are a bit trickier because it's at a grander scale. But I think that's kind of fascinating part. I think that's a bit of an attraction to the field as well.
Yeah, I love to think of it as like, well, everybody eats, right? So everybody eats, that's great, but not everybody's a chef. But that doesn't mean like what the Ratatouille movie, right? Everybody can be a chef if they want to. At the very least, you should be able to, cook some macaroni and cheese, right? And so you should be able to pull up a WordPress site, use a template, and make a good experience, even if you're just using the mac and cheese of the digital world, right? But there's other things, if we're talking medical devices or things like that, then I want an expert. I want somebody that's very well trained, that understands all the issues, to help design the software that the surgeon uses for that robot that's operating on my heart, right?
But the key in any field that we work in, or that the work that we're doing and specializing in, is having empathy for the user. So, in my opinion, user experience design is customer experience, understanding that customer from the start to finish, whether it's using a digital product or when the idea of they realize they need what you may offer. So how do you become first and foremost in their minds, and how do you deliver with their expectations and keep and retain that customer? So just having that empathy and awareness of your customers is key to me in terms of being a UX designer.
Yeah, and when I've worked with HR folks, then again, we tweak it a little bit because we talk about the employee experience, right? But we get them focusing on that, and again, depending on who you're talking about, like, to be as specific as you can. Sometimes the customer experience is a little bit too fuzzy, but yes, it's all part of that same mindset of, we're doing this for other folks. The most important, when possible, all else fails, let's make a great experience for somebody else, and the money and the success will follow.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So we have some insight into how teams, organizations, and the Buckeye State can get better at user experience and why it's important. I'll leave you with a couple quotes. I like to end these things with a couple quotes. And one is Martin LeBlanc, tech startup founder, says, user interface is like a joke. If you need to explain it, it's not that good. And trust me, I've told plenty of bad jokes in my time, and I never like to have to explain it. And then Dr. Ralph Speth, longtime European automotive executive, he said, if you think good design is expensive, you should look at the cost of bad design. I think if we can just create good experiences, and those experiences change over the time, by the way. So, as technology advances, for example, it's not just a one and done kind of situation either, right? You got to iteratively and constantly assess your user experience because even the customers' behavior changes or their expectations change based on lots of other factors, or their job changes.
Right. And the technology is changing all the time, right? So even if nothing else changed, it's like, we can just, all these extra things are possible. And so I like to use the user experience lens to help us figure out which new technologies are a good thing or a bad thing, right? Because just because we can doesn't mean we should.
That's right. Okay, cool. And one last thing, we didn't get to it today, but if for those of you that are curious, this is a little bit of a data example. It's held up over time, the Nordstrom Innovation Labs from 8 or 9 years ago, whereas they took user experience, created something innovative, real time in the store. It was a sunglass iPad app. So feel free to Google that, look that up. It's kind of interesting. It's like a 6-minute video, so it's not too long. But ultimately kind of brings together user experience, product management, innovation, quick iteration, customer feedback, all wrapped up into one case study. So that's it. Thanks for everybody who attended today. Thanks very much to our panelists, Felesia McDonald, Venessa Heilman, and Keith Instone. Feel free to look them up online. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions you might have or connect with you. So thanks again, everybody, for joining.